Right, well, ladies and gentlemen, photographers, musicians, and fans of rock and roll, good evening. Tonight, I'm thrilled to welcome to South Hill Park a man whose long and spectacular career has captured some of the most iconic names in music. Whether captured on stage in the frenzy of a performance or a portrait captured in the quiet times away from the crowds, him and his lens have given us a truly magnificent and unique perspective, capturing the raw reality of a life on stage and on the road. From touring with the Rolling Stones to taking some of Brad Pitt's very first headshots, he has been there and he has shot that. I was lucky enough to meet and work with Michael when I first started on my own journey into the world of freelance photography, when I, a starstruck young man, asked him for a business card. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my very great privilege to present the man who never took a day off in the 70s, my friend and mentor, Mr. Michael Putland.
Thank you. You did promise me dry ice.
Raising up through the... Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, Michael.
Sorry.
Just going to wet my whistle.
And thank you.
Well, yeah, as I say, it's a privilege to have you here. Now, this is one of many retrospective exhibitions you're doing. This is the 50th year that you've been working in the business.
Yep.
Sorry to remind you.
Yeah,
but, you know,
and asking me to do the Silver Surfer technology thing.
Oh, yeah. Little plug for one of our digital media courses.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
But
I can't afford it.
let's go back to where it all started. If you don't mind, you know, where do your first memories link with a camera? How did it fit into your childhood?
My grandmother's box brownie. I don't know whether people remember box brownies. She used to look down there, and yes, that was it. Worthing Beach, out of focus. Composition was all right though.
Oh right, yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, fantastic. So.
And then an uncle helped me a lot when I was 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
No, that's how it all developed. It was wonderful. So I got a lot of support.
Yeah. And would you say photography was something that you'd always wanted to do?
Well, from the age of, I think my first roll of film was when I was 9 years old,
Wow.
which was 1956. And I think it's on a website somewhere. But,
yeah. So how did you, from school, how did your career in photography start then?
I didn't really get any help in school, really. I mean, that didn't really happen in those days. I got a job as an assistant in a company called Sound Stills in Pimlico, and that's how it went. And the first day I learned to make a copy neg with I don't know how many of you are interested in photography, but with a 5.4 camera. It's like, doing a Xerox or a scan now. And that was my first day, and then things went from there. Before long I took a flight in a single-engined Auster aeroplane, which is known fact. You might know what an Auster aeroplane is.
Yeah.
And it had a glass thing over, and my boss was photographing an evangelical holiday camp.
Wow.
And we took off from Biggin Hill on a grass runway, and the engine's starting, and we're going. And I'm like, it was a bit like Kenneth Williams in an old Hancock. I was going, Mr. Jury, he's my boss, Mr. Jury. He said, I said, they've forgotten to put the door on. I really did. And they hadn't. He said, well, how on earth do you think we're going to lean out to take the photographs? This is my first ever flight.
Wow.
Unbelievable. It was, so many great experiences like that.
Did you need to change the film in the plane?
Yes, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
No, I mean, it was great. I loved it, but I was a tad nervous when the plane was bouncing down the runway.
Yeah. One of the themes for this evening, by the way, is for the younger members of our audience and for me myself, two generations of photographers and how photography now is so different from the
it is.
The world
it's incredibly different. Yeah.
So that's something that we're going to kind of be drawing on a lot this evening. So now you assisted Walter Curtin, who was one of the most prominent photojournalist.
Yeah, that was my second job. The first one was, we did everything from passports to quite good advertising photography.
Right.
You know, with big 10:8 cameras. It was...
Had you moved to London to do that? Or?
No, I was still living with mum and dad
Right.
in South Harrow.
Oh, right.
So it's the Piccadilly line.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think meeting Walter Curtin was really interesting. He was pretty terrifying. He was a time life photographer, and time life photographers in those days were the creme de la creme. You know, it was sort of like Cartier-Bresson, it was that kind of thing. This guy was brilliant. He shot with available light, and he was the sort of guy that the sort of technique and the guy certainly wanted to do what I grew to love, without sort of huge amounts of light. And you know, he was a great help. But God, he was a pain to work for.
Really?
Sorry, Walter. I'm sure he's long gone, but I don't
How long did you assist him for?
I was with him for a year. I was with the first company for 2 years, and learnt to print. Because most of the print, if you've seen the exhibition, most of the prints that are out there, I've made myself quite recently in my darkroom, and I love to print. It's great. So you know, printing I think that's gone, hasn't it? Printing.
Well,
I mean, it's different doing it on a printer and a, you know, whatever.
Did it take you a long time to perfect the skill? Because it's a.
I'm still, honestly, I know it sounds like normal, but I still am learning. And there's a guy at Getty, because I'm represented by Getty now, and there's a guy there, a guy called Brian, who is a master printer, and I actually want to ask him if I can just go and sit with him for the day and just work, you know, because he's taught me so much. And you know, I've been printing for 50 years. I used to print in my mum and dad's bathroom. Really annoyed my father. Never get into the bathroom.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I did a City and Guilds about 4 years ago, and it wasn't very popular amongst my fellow students, but I actually loved it because it's one of those things that it's very difficult to get right.
It is.
It's such a level of satisfaction when you.
Yeah, it's a real craft.
Yeah.
I did a chat with some lovely young kids, sort of 16 to 18, from the Brit School, which I thought they just did theatre, but they did. They had a photographic department, and the enthusiasm for printing. I think I've locked myself up for months now, where they're going to have to come down when I'm printing and see if they. I mean, hopefully they could learn something from me, but.
Yeah, I think it'll have a resurgence. Personally.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, a bit like vinyl.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, now something I know firsthand as a photographer is how competitive photography is, especially these days. Everyone can get a camera, get your phone, pick your phone up, and you can take a picture on that. How did you find it when you started?
There weren't anywhere near as many people doing it as now. But it wasn't easy because there were 4 music magazines. You know, when you think about it, and the national press. First time I remember seeing a picture of the Rolling Stones was in the national press, was when they were caught having a quick pee behind a garage door on the way back from somewhere, and they couldn't find a loo. You know, and I mean, they just didn't. You couldn't sell to the national press. Not at all, actually. So anyway, there were only these 4 magazines, and 1 or 2 around the world: Germany, Japan, and there were perhaps 10 or 12 of us in the country really doing it at that time.
So you didn't have any friends at that time, you know, who were doing it as well? I mean,
I became friendly with 1 or 2 of them. Yeah. You know, and still know them, 1 or 2 of them, and nearly all of them are still around somewhere or another.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So, I mean, did you have to spend much time dedicated to finding work, or did you find was it quite?
It was impossible.
Yeah.
There's a story that my dear old friend Barry, who worked with me at my first studio, he one day called me up after I left Walter Curtin. I actually did 6 weeks at Hallmark Cards, in the dark room at Hallmark Cards, because I was desperate for work. But they were anyway. So he said, "You've got a studio," and I said, "Look, I can't afford a studio." Anyway, a couple of weeks later, I found myself in a studio, £9 a week between 3 of us. £9 a week, fortune in those days. And I couldn't get arrested for 2.5 years. Absolutely could not. I mean, I was photographing people, photographing concerts, doing everything I could, and I'd sell the odd picture for space rate, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't actually, get paid for doing anything. Which probably leads on to the story of when I was going to quit. I don't know if you know about that story. You do. Should I go on from there?
Please do.
So my dear mate Barry, I owed him a lot of money, and I was really getting embarrassed. So I said I was going to quit, and he was furious with me. He said, "You can't quit, it'll work," He wasn't getting much work either. And so I said, "No, that's it." So we really had an argument. We went out, we got drunk, came in next morning with a hangover, literally to pick up my gear. This is absolutely true. And a wonderful woman called Judy Noakes, who worked at a magazine called Disco Music Echo, which is a pop version of, some of you might remember Melody Maker and Enemy. You knew it.
You should buy this.
Ah! You had to look at my stuff then. But she said to me, "I've got a shoot for you." And I said, "Look, I was so depressed, probably hungover as well, got to be honest." I said, I'm going to quit. And she said, "No, you've really got to do this." And in the end, I thought this conversation's going a long time. So I said, "Judy, who is it?" And she said it was Mick Jagger. And it was absolutely true. And so I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And then they gave me a colour shoot almost every week from then on. And colour shoots were very rare in those days because it was nearly all black and white. So Mick saved my life on more than once, actually, on more than one occasion during the story that goes on. But,
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Excellent. So would you say that was that marked the start of then what would become your...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know what I'd be doing now.
Moment.
I might be a printer, although perhaps there's not many printers left, so I don't know. But it was absolutely saved my life.
So actually, I wanted to ask, had that not happened, what do you think you would have moved away from photography then?
Well, that time I was becoming a reasonably okay, journeyman printer, photographic printer. So I could hold my own on that, and I was actually hiring out myself to labs to print for 1 day a week or 2 days a week to sort of give me some dosh.
Yeah.
And I might well have been doing that, but what would have happened now how many darkrooms are there left now? Very, very, very few, which will bring us on to our conversation about digital and everything later.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, that must have been incredible, especially given the time as well, with... What do you mean, the era? Yeah.
Oh, the era was amazing.
The perfect time to...
It was just incredible, yeah. And I loved the Stones. I mean, because I think that was the thing that when I left school, I thought, I can't do a real job, So, and I still don't think I've ever had a real job, except perhaps when, as you know, when we formed a photo agency, and because, but I suppose it was a real job, wasn't it? God. But, from a photographic point of view, so is music and photography. I love them, and it just developed from there.
Yeah. So, did you? How did it develop your relationship with the Stones?
Well, the relationship with the Stones didn't start for quite some time. Basically, what happened was, if you worked for a magazine in those days, you started to meet PR guys, women, and they would then say, "Oh, would you like to photograph someone?" Because they thought, I could get pictures in Disco Music Echo. I mean, God, wasn't exactly Vogue, but so, and that developed, and then they started to give me assignments, and it grew amazingly. It was incredible, and then one day, 3 or 4 years later, jumping onto the Stones, I got a call from Annie Ivell, who was the publicist for the Stones. She actually, in fact, I think it must have been, thinking back, it must have been before this. In fact, anyway, she called me one day and she said, she was a London girl, she said, "Lovey," she said, "I'd love you to go and photograph Eric Clapton. He's having a party tomorrow." So I said, "Okay, Annie, fine." And I said, oh, well, I'll be there, that's no problem. I was in London. And she said, can you get it processed and get the prints out the next day? I said, no problem at all. And I'm just putting it in front. I said, Annie, and I was in London, she said, but aren't you in New York? She said, oh, yes. So I got on a plane to New York, photographed a party. There must have been 100 photographers in New York that could have done, because I've never been very good at that sort of stuff. But no, I did it, flew back, processed the film, got it out to the papers. It was incredible. It was just amazing. And but then, sorry, going back to Annie and the Stones, she one day called me up and said, would you like to, would you be interested in doing a Stones tour? Yeah. So she said, well, look, Mick's going down to Wales because they're on the tour, which never happened actually. They were going to do a concert at Cardiff Castle. I said, Mick wants to see if you go down with him and, see if he can stand your company sort of thing, which seemed to happen okay. So then a few weeks later, there I was in Vienna. It's amazing. And that was the first night of the tour. But I know that you're interested in this, Alex, that what happened pre-digital, first of all, you had to stay in the hotel room because there were no mobile phones, because you had to, so people could phone you and, say, can you be here, there, wherever. So for the sound check and for this and that. But after the gig, you get the first plane in the morning, which is often some silly hour, and I'm terrible in the morning, as certainly someone here knows. And then you come back, you process the film, you dry it, you make prints, and try before lunchtime to be out round Fleet Street, because you could walk in the back doors of magazine companies and newspapers in those days, and and just put the pictures on the desk.
Wow.
And it just sort of, look, this was last night's gig, and that's what I did.
So
and then
I think there was no middleman. It was just you.
In those days, yes, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
But I remember on that occasion, on one of those trips on that early part of that tour, in fact, two. One, you get off the plane, you process the film, and then you go and photograph Roger Daltrey of The Who, get back on a plane and go back on a Stones gig. And then you do 2 or 3 days and you come back, and then I remember doing Fleetwood Mac. It was, because I've just been, there's a possibility that I might be doing a book with the Stones. I don't know when it's going to happen, because but it could, and so they've been asking me to write. And it's just all the memories flooding back, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, God, because you look at the negative files and you can see that's the same day.
Yeah.
How did I do it? I don't know. Couldn't do it now.
Incredible. Now, just to sidestep quickly. Now, your style, I mentioned earlier, it really is so perfectly suited to rock and roll, because it just captures the intensity and the raw energy of that we think of as rock and roll. It literally encapsulates, it in an image. Now, did you, with that style, which is apparent across all of your photos, is that something you consciously developed, or did it just sort of?
It's just what I loved.
Yeah.
I just felt I had to take. There's a great photographer, probably someone you know the name of, Terry O'Neill, who he did the same stuff. He's a great photographer. I'm not in any way knocking. He's a terrific photographer, but then he was able to do all that sort of stuff with the makeup and the, and do all the glam stuff, which a lot of people did. But I couldn't do that. I just had to photograph the person behind the eyes, and just.
And I know you.
If they were beautiful in their head, I know it sounds corny, but I think you know what I mean.
But you prefer working with natural light
Yep.
generally?
Yeah.
So how did
I
you?
can't, so many people, and I think probably he's the same, Terry's the same. He goes with 10 people, and I get confused. I'm like, how poor I am technically. I mean, I just like the little sort of camera with film in it, and see and watch the person's face and just try and capture what they're saying, really.
So the studio work you did, was that because you had to? Or?
Oh yeah, and I did do that. I did Popstar. I did, I did the Wombles.
Yeah,
Come on.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I did. I was so cool. I did. No, I did. I photographed them but you didn't have to make them up.
Yeah. That was in the studio.
Oh, all over. There was a wonderful guy called Mike Batt who wrote all those songs, made a fortune. Wow. And I became very friendly with him, and he was a lovely guy, and we were always going off somewhere, and he and everybody else were climbing into these. You do know the Wombles aren't. Yeah, okay, fine. It's almost a Father Christmas moment. But no, I didn't answer your question. Yeah, I did a lot of studio, and some of it I look back and I'm sort of reasonably okay with. Looking back, I think it was a nice picture. And use strobe, flash. We used to call it strobe. Have you heard that word?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that was very. That I just found it. I was just. Nerves were almost my problem, and strobe used to have these huge, big machines to pump out the power. And if you fired too quickly, you underexposed the, and particularly with colour, I mean, every third image of mine you had to throw in the bin. But,
that actually brings us quite nicely onto what I wanted to ask about your like workflow at the time. Like, did you have much time to go through and really edit the shots, or did you? That's
an interesting question. I'm finding stuff now because with these exhibitions that have been going on, I'm surprised. I look back and sometimes I don't remember them. I mean, they're 45 years ago, 50 years ago. Not 50. Yeah, some of them are 50 years old. I mean, not all of you have been to the Monkeys press conference, have you? No. Which is funny, actually.
You mentioned Alex. Some earlier about some of the things that you saw as you toured. Now, the very nature of photographer means that you're kind of it's quite an intimate relationship. Photo is quite an intimate thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
When we're talking about rock and roll, was there ever? Do you feel that you ever sort of saw things that no one else had really seen?
I don't know. Well, yeah, you see the odd thing, but I should write a book, perhaps. Yeah. No, but you do. But I mean, the important thing is you see people just as they are. Yeah. And that was a problem for me because sometimes I would take pictures of people and it would be exactly how they were,
Yeah.
I shouldn't really say this, but I'm going to because I think he's amazing. But like Van Morrison, not the easiest guy in the world, Great, extraordinary artist, but it's very hard not to make him look a bit grumpy, Yeah. Sorry, Van.
Yeah. People are who they are, aren't they? Yeah. I mean, was the rock and roll, was it as we imagine now, or certainly as I imagine, not having grown up through it? Would you say that what you saw and photographed was true to the general perception now, or is it romanticised?
I mean, that is. No, it was wonderful. It was such an exciting time. It was incredible. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful time.
Yeah.
And people did lots of naughty things in every way. The whole drug, sex, and rock and roll thing. Obviously it did go on, and but also. I mean, even when I was a kid, The Who played my local pub. Can you imagine? I mean, they were great. You go down there every Saturday night, looking for girls and listening to what turned out to be one of the greatest bands that ever came. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And there were so many people. Georgie Fame, the Stones. I mean, I did I know I'm getting away slightly. I'm on a roll, so shut me up with it. Going to see I think the first time I saw the Stones was on a package show with the Everly Brothers, Bo Diddley, and Little Richard. I mean, it's a real rock and roll history. It's just amazing, really. And they played, I think it was Hammersmith Odeon, and they all do four numbers. Yeah. That's it. Finish. That was amazing. That was before they really got hit by the screaming. The Stones got hit by that screaming thing, which then you really couldn't see them through it. It was a nightmare.
So I mean, nowadays, as you've obviously more recently in your career, have you noticed that there's very often with music photography now, it's very glitzy and Photoshop and clean.
Yeah.
You know, which is...
I think it lacks a bit of soul, but I think I'm just becoming an old duffer, really.
No, I do. I do completely agree with you, and I think you know, it lacks the spirit.
I think so. Yeah, I do. I mean, you know, it's
a bit of a leading question there, but
well, no, it's just that you know, you don't want to spoil it. I don't know. I did a talk. Did I mention when we were talking earlier? I did a talk with some students recently, and these things come up, and you know, they're really enthusiastic, and you really want to just not to kill their enthusiasm and try and.
Well, I think.
And the ones that wanted to learn to print, a couple of them wanted to, you know, ask me if they could, you know, if they could print with me and things like that. I think it's great because it's a craft and it's got more soul, I think. Yeah. But I've got to be very careful because you see some amazing digital work, and I shoot digital, of course I do. Yeah.
I think the
and you're brilliant yourself with digital. I mean, you know, it's just.
Oh, thank you very much.
You know, it's just you can't. I'm not knocking it. Is what I'm trying to say.
No, I know completely. I think the problem is that there's so many media outlets for how to photograph things, and there's so many books, there's so many resources online, and they all tell you how to construct an image. You've got to do this, you've got to follow this rule, you've got to do X, Y, and Z to get a good shot. You've got to use this piece of equipment, you've got to buy that. And I think what's so fantastic about your photography is that you just got what was there. You used what was available to you, and you got the shot using the light, the equipment you had. We have so many advantages with digital technology these days that I would never say that, you know, that it's fantastic and we should use what we've got, but I think people worry too much about how they construct a shot and what they.
Well, you know what's interesting, because talking to these students, you look back and I think, you know, I never studied photography. I got a job at 16, as I said. You know, I was dumped in there and got bullied into learning the job very quickly. Yeah. And I don't want to say that, you know, that a photographic education isn't a great thing, because I'm sure it is. But I think it was like an old-fashioned apprenticeship. Yeah. And you learn from, you know, I used to work for a guy called Louis Clementaski. I was hired out by my first company. He's a wonderful guy. He was a Russian man who was a racing car driver and did the Mille Miglia. I don't know if any of you racing people know the Mille Miglia. You know, as a navigator and photographing all around Italy. This guy was brilliant, and but he shot everything on Leicas and, you know, not everything, but most things. Yeah. And we did advertising shoots together. He did the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud brochure when it first came out. I mean, just amazing. But it was all feel, you know, and I learned from him because there weren't people that taught you in his day, because he was obviously already, I don't know what Louis was, 40 or 50 when I was working with him as a 16-year-old. So, and he did it all by feel and learning. Yeah. You know, I've just got this amazing picture at home of the Monaco Grand Prix in something like 1912. You know, no, it's not that long, but and it's full of atmosphere and smoke, and you know, it's just really incredible.
Yeah, well, that completely, and that's why I relate so much to your photography, is because it's an instinct. You know,
it's nice if you got, you know, I think I'm just so terrible, technically. Just absolutely terrible, but I do have a feel, I think. And that's should be the most important thing, and I think that sometimes that's lost these days in the way that photography is sort of presented and exactly.
I think. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next phase of the evening, and I'm just going to go through some of the images that are exhibited across the hallway, and get some insight into.
Okay, right.
So this first shot is of Nina Simone. Am I right in saying that this was one of your first gigs? Is that
no, well, it's a story actually. I don't know. Do you remember David Redfern? Verity? Yeah, wonderful jazz photographer who sadly we lost last year. Dear friend of mine, and David. He sort of took me under his wing, you know, and he just said to me, I said to him one day, David, I can't get to do things that are more interesting. He said, I'll get you into the BBC. I said, what? He said, yeah, it's fine, I know. And he called this woman called Sheila Lord, and he said to me, she's expecting your call. Fine, you know. So I found myself shooting Top of the Pops. You know, this was a David Frost show with Johnny Ray. Does anyone remember Johnny Ray? don't admit to it. Yeah, and somebody else on there, and Nina Simone, who I adored. And you're just sort of like 3 feet away from her while she's being filmed on television. It was amazing. Yeah. But that was, I don't know, was that 68, 67, something like that? Something like that. Shouldn't admit to any of it, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a great demonstration of what we were just talking about, because, you know, how did you find shooting in, and I know because I work a lot in theatre, the light that you're presented with is less than ideal most of the time for photographers.
Yeah, well, you know, in those days you used to shoot colour, which I didn't shoot that night because I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to roll a colour film. It's true. Yeah. And you used to have, stop me when I get really boring, but there used to be 2 kinds of film. There was daylight balance film, which you could shoot in daylight, obviously, and then there was tungsten for film for this. And the BBC TV lights were always a mix of the 2. They'd have a daylight spotlight on the artist and tungsten all the way round, because they were shooting in black and white. What do they care? You know? So it was very hard technically, but and you know, David, the guy I was telling you about, he was so good technically. Every exposure, I used to want to kill him. You know, it was just perfect. You know, and what E6, the old colour slides, was just it was you know.
So anyway. You had no light meter in the camera.
Just trying to think. Probably not then, but very soon afterwards.
Right.
But then it wasn't a spot meter, you see. You know, and then you've got a problem with you know, with people like Nina. She was wearing a white dress. You know, she's a black lady. When you shoot concerts like that, you always had that problem. It's very difficult to get the balance, because especially if there's one spot. Yeah. And colour film wasn't as forgiving as digital now. So you'd have, you know, to get the expression right and you know, and all the lovely skin tones, you'd find that this was transparent if it was white. Yeah. And it was difficult. I mean, even when I printed this today, well, not today, a few months ago, it was very difficult. You have to burn in all the dress to get all the tones in there, and yet keep her expression. I'd always wanted to shoot her one-to-one, but I think she'd be terrifying. I never met her, actually. Right. Yeah, but she just came on. I think she did something some of you probably remember, Hair. What was the song she did? Was it I've Got... That's it. Yeah, that's what she did. Terrifying. Okay.
Just like interested where you shot this from. Were you what? It looks
right
like
by the camera.
Right.
Right by the camera. I mean, I used to just go up to the BBC, go in there and say, I think a pass has been left. Yeah, here you are. And I used to get full rain. Oh, wow. Yeah. Ludicrous. I mean, they wouldn't allow you even in there now. No.
Yeah. Great. So now talking about summarising rock and roll in a shot.
Yeah.
This next.
Oh, you're going to show the who shot? Yeah.
Is the one that I think does it quite nicely.
Yeah. What a bit of luck. Before, you know, not that I ever used really autofocus, but it was a bit, probably, I guess a lot of you are music fans, yeah? Yeah, so you obviously know The Who, and that was Madison Square Garden, 1979, I think. And I was on stage. You were in those days, right behind the, yeah. It's incredible, isn't it, when you think back? And it was the end of the show. Pete threw his guitar up, and I just went like that. It was luck. It really was. It was like, no, there was an element of luck. I mean, look, the guitar's completely perfectly, and it was just one frame. There were no motor drives in those days where you could go.
Right. So there's not a sequence.
No, just the one. No.
Did you manually focus that?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I don't use autofocus now.
Oh really?
Well, in fact, I did for a while, and I got so fed up with it because the bit I wanted to be in focus, you know, you had to move the camera and then recompose. So I've gone back to manual focusing. No, that was all. But it was a bit of luck, obviously.
So this is was it? Because I mean, there's so many things about. I mean, this is quite a bad representation because of the lights in this room. But if you go out and see the actual shot, which is on the wall, there's so many things about the shot. You can see the amps in the foreground and the crowd in the distance. Where exactly on the stage were you?
I was behind the amp.
Right, so
you see, can you just see faintly the kids in the audience?
Yeah.
And I was just behind 2 amps, literally Keith Moon's, no, it wasn't Keith Moon then, I don't think. I think that was after he died, was it? I'm not sure, but if he had been drumming, he would have, whoever was drumming was just around there.
And were you with other photographers in that spot, or was it just
No,
you?
I think I was the only one, yeah.
Just you?
Yeah.
Was it how many, I mean, was that typical that you would be the only photographer at a gig?
No, but photographer, there's normally 2 or 3 or 4, and they'd shoot the whole show.
Yeah.
But I went to shoot the Who in London last week. No, not last week. When was it? July, when they played the Park. I think some of you are Who fans. I get the odd person. And yeah. Oh, you were? Yeah. Ah, fantastic. So. Very, very good pictures of Pete and Roch. Well, don't for goodness sake show them up against mine because I don't want to look stupid. But no, I bumped into the manager afterwards, and I got there, and I've known these people so many years. I don't know them well at all, and I just said to Bill, first of all, I get there, and they say, well, you're the Who's photographer, and I said, I just asked if I could come and photograph. So I get there, and I said to Bill, the manager, I said, you know, I'd love to do a bit more than the 2 numbers for everybody else. He said, oh, no, whatever you want. You know, and he said, it sounds arrogant, but I don't mean it in that way. I just mean it, you know, he said, look, we've always got on well, you've been good to us, and they've certainly been good to me. So I said there was probably 50 photographers in the pit. It was embarrassing. They pulled everybody else out.
Hey,
it was just, you know.
Treatment,
yeah, but it was lovely. I did like it a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't.
Fantastic. So was that common then, guitars being thrown?
Oh, Pete did, yeah.
Yeah.
Pete used to smash his equipment. Yeah, he's a baby, isn't he? A very nice baby, but he's a baby. No, he made his name. He used to smash guitars and, yeah. He did, yeah. Keith Moon with the drums and, yeah. It was amazing.
Brilliant. Okay, right. So now the next shot is of the Clash.
Yep.
Now, I mean, I shoot bands very occasionally, not very often, but I always find it's tricky to take an impactful shot of more than two people.
Oh, absolutely! It's a nightmare.
So how I mean, you've achieved it with this one. It's fantastic. Now, how did you?
Oh,
did you think
many
much
times
about
I've been having people in the studio when I was asked to do them in the studio, and I'm thinking, God, what am I going to do? You know, just a brick wall before I go in. Now, they were South London boys, and they didn't want to do the shoot. It's a funny story, actually, which is not answering your question. Can I do the story? And they said, no, we're not going to do it. Because I got down there, and they're all really being arsey, being difficult. And I said, well, I really want to do it. So we want to go. We're getting a plane this afternoon back to England, and we want to go and get some boots uptown, sort of like the equivalent of Army and Navy stores or something like whatever it was. No, anyway, they wanted some boots.
Yeah.
So in the end, the only way I persuaded them to do that shoot was to give them the money that they could afterwards go and get the boots, because it saves them going to the record company first, because they hadn't got time. I gave them the money. The record company reimbursed me, actually. And it was the only way I got them to do that. So they were kind of, oh, right, we'll do it,
Yeah. So, I mean, did you typically, when you go to a shoot, do you tend to just, when it's something like this, go with what you've got, or do you sort of give it a great deal of thought beforehand? Or
no, not really, no. I've always been a wing and a prayer in everything I've ever done. I'm not sure you should laugh that much. Go on, sorry.
No, brilliant. No, fantastic. Where is that?
New York, on the piers.
Oh, okay.
On the piers. Yeah, sorry, I should have made that clear. It was in New York, and they were flying back to England. And I was living in New York at the time.
And how was it arranged? Was it you just got a phone call and?
I had a girlfriend at the time who used to work at Columbia Records. I can't. I think it might have. She worked for Columbia International, and she was a big fan. She was trying to promote them. She wanted to get, and she thought if I did the pictures, they'd get back to England and Europe and Japan and do all that sort of stuff.
Because you lived in New York for a time.
Yeah, I moved to New York in '77.
Were you living there at this?
Yeah, this was '78, I think, or something. and that's where the picture of Bob Marley, Mick Jagger, and Peter Tosh. There was some okay stuff done in New York. Great place to live.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it and hate it. You know, it's great.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so moving on to the next shot, we've got now.
Keith.
Johnny Depp famously based his character of Jack Sparrow on Keith Richards here. Now you can see why. This is another great example. So how did this? Was this set up in any way, or was he?
Yeah, it was. I never actually got that close to so many people that I photographed. Some photographers really, go out to dinner all the time and all that sort of thing. But I never really. But Keith was difficult, and we all know that he'd had his issues in the 70s and whatever. And he was a bit frightening, actually. I mean, I found him a bit nerve-wracking. Anyway, I got a call. He got busted, the Toronto drug bust. I think quite a lot of people here possibly remember that. Yeah, and it was really serious. He could have gone to jail for a very, very, very long time, which he got out of by the Stones playing a gig for charity in Toronto. And his manager, Jane, called me up and said, Michael, he said, I want you to take some happy, smiling pictures of Keith. Okay. And I said, is he all right, Jane? He said, he'd be fine. So I get up there. Anita Pallenberg, who was his girlfriend at the time, was sitting was with a bathrobe in the living room. This was upstate in New York. And I'm waiting and waiting. An hour and a half later, Keith comes down. He says, hello, mate. I was thinking, oh, hi, Keith, nice to see you. He said, would you like a cup of tea? But he had some technical issues, I remember, with the kettle and the water and getting it together. So his security guard, he's such a sweet, and I haven't seen him for years, but he became such a lovely, sweet, lovely man. So I'm not knocking him, but it was funny. And we went out, when we did this, he said, I haven't seen daylight for a couple of years. So, and then it went, and then he said, how are you getting back to, I suppose it's all right now. He said to me, how are you getting back to New York? I said, I'll Jim, the security guard, I'm sure he'll take me to stay. He said, no, I'll drive you back. It's fine. So we get in this Jag. Can I tell this story? I can tell the story, okay.
Definitely.
So he said to me, he's on a drug bust, for Christ's sake, it's just ridiculous. He said to me, he's driving very, very quickly. Not more than 100 miles an hour, but he said to me, actually, I shouldn't really, this is going viral, I shouldn't really tell you. Anyway, let's just say he was, I forgot this was going viral, I thought it was just us. He did ask me to take something out of the glove compartment, which was like a totem pole, and I'll leave that all to your imagination. But I never did that, you see, I never did. Yeah, very few people believe this, but I never did the drugs, never did any of that. So.
Was it around you, like?
Yeah, all the time. And it was like that day.
Yeah.
If Keith Richards was possibly, hypothetically, to offer you a joint, it's very hard to say no. And I did, and I felt like a complete prat, because I felt it's silly. Just was something I didn't do, And no, so many times you'd be sitting around with a group of people working on photographing backstage, and go around, and I wouldn't do it, and they'd all look at me and go, well. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, I kept my pictures in focus.
Yeah. Fantastic. Right, and moving on to the next image. Now this is this is a cracking one. This was taken round the corner in Ascot. Wasn't it?
Yeah. In the do you remember Imagine, the song, the white room where the video was? That was there, and I'd photographed Lennon a week before for another magazine, another legendary magazine that someone's going to remember, Beat Instrumental. No? Nobody remembers it? Oh, you do? Oh, great. Sad, aren't we, really? Anyway, this was for the legendary Disco Music Echo. And he'd had an argument with the journalist, and I'm not going to use the words he used. The journalist said to me, I've got a real problem because John is really cross with me about what I've written. He said, we've got to go and take some pictures. So he bought another journalist because he was feeling nervous. This guy, a guy called Mike Ledgerwood, was a equivalent of a Radio 1 disc jockey at the time. I mean, he was serious stuff. And so we get there, and he said, go and knock at the door. And I said, well, I was the new kid on the block. I'd only been shooting for a year, really. He said, no, go and knock on the door. He's a lovely guy, Mike. So I knocked on the door, and Lennon opens the door. And he goes, hello, mate. I said, hello, Mr. Lennon. He said, we worked together this week before, haven't we? I said, yeah. He said, come on in. He said, I want you to come and see how I'm doing, because he was into baking bread. You probably heard all those stories. And he had all these different flours. He said, come on in, put his arm around me. And then he looked, I won't say what he said, but he said, you two must be from Disco Music Echo, and left them standing up. I was like, you know. But no, and the interview took place, and there was some firm words spoken, and then we were there for several hours. It was lovely. He was a sweetheart.
Several hours. Wow.
Well, 3 or 4 certainly. Yeah.
So what was what's sort of happening in this shot? What was this?
Well, they were just chatting. Yeah, just chatting. Yeah. In fact, you could really give away. Look, you can see the microphone in the corner there.
No, incredible. Right, the next shot is.
Oh, this is interesting. Do you see who they are, most of them? I just had a call from a film director who's making a film about that meeting of those women. And they've asked me to reshoot. I mean, unfortunately, sadly, Polystyrene. Do you know who they all are? Polystyrene. Yeah, she was quite popular. It was when I was in America, so I didn't really know her. But I think she died a few years ago. But the rest of them are all there. Apparently, Debbie Harry's all into it, and they've asked me to reshoot it. Wow. Probably didn't like it the first time.
Fantastic. Well, it's great. You know, I mean, obviously, rock and roll, fairly sort of male-dominated.
Yeah.
Really. You know, was there, you know, did the way you interact with it, with taking the pictures, was it different in any way? No. I was a bit out of my depth really, because I missed all the punk thing in England, because I went to New York when the punk thing. So I mean, I didn't know Susie, Viv Albertine, who I've sort of have you know, I know her a little now, and you know, I've helped her out with photography a couple of times. It's lovely, but they were all scary to me. I mean, all these people that spat at everybody and everything. I didn't really quite understand that, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But it worked. It worked. So where's this taken?
Royal Garden Hotel, Kensington.
Right.
And they've just discovered that, and they're doing a 50-year book, and they're quite pleased. So you know, it's all
right. And there's some other shots in this from this shoot actually out in the
a different one, yeah, different.
The portfolios with some, so if you want to have a look, please do. Great. The next shot, please. David Bowie there.
David Bowie.
Typically androgynous, yeah.
Yeah, I'll make these quicker for you, otherwise you'll get bored to tears. But David Bowie, 3 or 4 weeks before, I'd photographed him at the Friars Club at Aylesbury, which is a small club, and it was just before, he was doing Hunky Dory then. Do you know that album? Yeah. And, you know, it was great. I loved it. I thought it was terrific. And then someone said, will you go and... It was Disco Music Echo again. It was really. And he arrived at the door wearing this, the same thing he wore on stage when I saw him a couple of weeks before in Aylesbury, with a paintbrush in his hand. He was painting his ceiling. So I photographed him painting his ceiling. It seemed like the right thing to do.
Naturally. Fantastic.
So that's that one.
Yeah. Great, okay. Now our last shot is the...
Bob, Mick and Pete, yeah.
Now you've said to me in the past that this is your most sort of successful shot.
So certainly print-wise, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I've got a very strange, which isn't very rock and roll at all, but I don't know, for the arts people with you, I mean, you know the old triptychs from the Renaissance and all those sort of things. I've known nothing, I'm not trying to say I know, but they had a certain feel. It's kind of like a triptych. Mm-hmm. It kind of just works that, though, you know, I don't know, I was in a very, very, very tiny room, much smaller than this, with obviously Mick, all the Stones, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Paul and Linda McCartney, a couple of management people, And there was barely room to take that photograph. But Mick seemed quite keen to have it taken. I realised that I think he probably was very fond of Marley, and Peter Tosh too. And he put on a really lovely smile for me, I think, don't you?
It's so relaxed. Yeah.
It's just, and he'd come off stage then, you see, he was very tired. No, this was at the Palladium Theatre in New York, about 1978. And it was like a, I don't know, 2,500 seater. And he, funnily enough, going back with this book story thing, the Stones book story thing, I suddenly realised, I've seen the Stones so many times, I've never seen them ever do anything, but particularly Mick and Keith, just work so hard. I've got a picture of Mick coming off stage, and you can see he's just drained. And he was there, he was just drained, he was white. He was completely ashen. And I remember Keith on stage once, I think it was Wembley, he had an abscess on his gum. And his face was swollen out like that. And but he went on, and he was brilliant. He wrapped a scarf around him, and just try and cover it, because he looked... It's really swollen. Everyone's like, you can't do this. No, I'll do it. You've got to admire that, really, really. I think they're amazing. Yeah. Has anyone seen them lately? No? I saw them at the Dreadful O2 about a year and a half ago, and just to watch, and because someone here wanted to go and see them. And they were amazing. They really were great. Yeah. They're still terrific.
Still going.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're now going to just move on to a quick Q&A.
Yeah, of course.
If you could all... I'm going to open up to the floor. So, if anyone's got any questions they'd like to ask Michael, raise your hand and I'll come and... raise your hand and I'll...
It's always difficult. Oh, go on.
Sir.
We're the same age, roughly.
Are we? Why do you look so much younger? I thought he seemed like a nice guy.
You say because you've been around these people for many years.
Yeah.
How many of them did you really get to know that say that you would put the word friend to?
Very few. I always felt it was more important to keep a distance. It's a really good question. There are people, yes. And there are people that I'm pleased to see, and I think they're pleased to see me. But I toured with George Michael for quite a lot in Japan, Australia. He was such a lovely man, really, really nice guy. Not, completely, my kind of music, but, you have to really admire him. He's a great songwriter. And we ended up, he was so kind, he took a whole group of us out nearly every night to dinner, and we'd talk and whatever, and he was just lovely, but I don't feel I was... Yeah, I feel there's this... I don't know whether I made a mistake with that, whether it would have been better if I'd have, but I just felt I didn't want to cross over that thing.
And as a supplement to that, you must have had to deal with some very old people. We talk about Van Morrison. I remember seeing Van Morrison at the Albert Hall with a large 8-timer on his piano, and when it run through, he left.
That's a surprise.
That was his...
Yeah.
That was at the Royal Albert Hall. Some of them must be completely utter.
No, I don't. Van is a difficult man, but very few. No, honestly, very, very honestly. I don't. I don't know. Should I do that Van Morrison story? I was working for Q magazine. Van Morrison said, I won't do the interview unless Spike Milligan, do you all know, most of you know who Spike Milligan is, would do the interview. So it's fine. Spike said, I'm a big fan, I'd love to do it, because he's a big jazz fan, I think. So we went to Spike's house near the south coast in Sussex. And I was a bit nervous, because probably some of you know that Spike was a bit, he could suffer from depression, he could be very, he was on incredible form. I was there with the journalist from Q. We were crying. He was so funny. So eventually, Van arrives, comes down, sits down. Very important part of this conversation is this in Spike's living room was a thick, and I mean a thick, white shag carpet. Just bear that in mind over the whole thing. So Spike's being funny, and Van's going, this sounds like a whole thing about getting at poor Van Morrison, who I admire so much. But anyway, he went, uh-huh. Uh-huh. At one point, it got so bad, at one point, Spike turns around to me, and he said, what's the matter with him? He said, is he a prosy? I said, don't drag me into that. Suddenly, Mrs. Milligan comes in and said, Van, would you like a cup of coffee? So Van said, uh-huh. And it was a chair like this, and he put it on she said, and he went, didn't really say anything. Spike goes on. And this is, apparently Van Morrison was the man that drove around London, it was cassette machines in those days, with Spike Milligan, I'm sorry, I'm killing your time.
No, please.
Listening to Spike Milligan tapes and laughing.
Yeah.
Suddenly Spike got to him, and Van Morrison started to rock. And he started to rock. He started to pound his chest. Suddenly the coffee, it was so high, it went up and the coffee went right across. Not only that, but when Mrs. Milligan bought him another cup, he did it again. And I left with Spike and Mrs. Milligan sort of going, oh, yeah, we'll have to get a new cup. So, but I'm sorry, I shouldn't have made that. To answer your question, no, I mean, Van was never rude to me or anything. He just, and once I got him talking about Georgie Fame when I photographed him a little bit later, he was happy, you know. I think he just wanted to talk about music and didn't want to do anything else. But no, I can't think of any really bad experience. Really, you know, some are better than others. Some are absolutely lovely, you know.
Yeah.
Some you get drunk with. Alex Harvey. Do you remember Alex Harvey? Yeah, he was a lovely man. We had fish and chips and a bottle of scotch between us in the studio. You liked Alex Harvey? Yeah. Yeah, he's great. He was just, you know, Blind Man. Do you remember that song, Blind Man? Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Fun? Oh God, yeah. He was, yeah, something like that. Yeah. He was great and a sweet, sweet man. But so sometimes you had those magical moments, but I didn't then, again, to finish off the question, I didn't then sort of invite him to dinner, or did he invite me? But we had a lovely evening together, and I was a big fan too, so it was great, you know, big admirer. So.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Lady at the back.
I think it changed a bit. I mean, I don't want to be boring if people aren't technical, but I started off always on 35mm. Well, no, I started off on a box brownie, but so it's 35mm film. That went on, I had a Milford Sportsman and a Dixer. But when I was working, I went into Nikon, and then Hasselblad, of course. And then I still use a Hasselblad. And I used the Mamiya RZ. Do you know that one? The 6x7 one for a while. And of course, I do sometimes shoot with 5x4, the old, you know, with the, you know, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, everything you see here, I think, is printed by me. I think, I can't absolutely swear, but it's very rare. There might be some from when we were all working together, you know, that Peter printed, or, you know, some, but very few, you know. So generally, I print everything. So when I had an exhibition at Getty recently with 80 images, and they said to me, and I thought, oh my God, here we go. But I got it done quite quickly, really, in a few weeks.
Fantastic.
Sorry, you were...
Yeah, I was going to ask you about photo shoots. When you think of photo shoot, I was thinking about the Clash. How do you go about getting the kind of expressions you want? Do you just tell them to go and stand and keep photographing what you want? Or do you say what expressions you want and you tell them to pose? How do you get what you want?
I just try and find... You go back to Van Morrison, when I was struggling with him, even though it was only a little while after this last, the shoot I told you about, you know, I just trying to find something to lighten him up. And when he realised I was a big fan of Georgie Fame. I don't know if any of you know Georgie Fame, but I'm a huge admirer of him. And we got on really. It's just a question of. It was like the thing with the Boots, you know, where I'll pay it, you know. With the Clash. It was the Clash you were mentioning, wasn't it? Yeah.
Are you talking to them all the time? Or
Quite a lot. Yeah, quite a lot. I find that works for me. Just getting a, you know, it's like, as you're looking sort of quite questioning now, if I was shooting you, exactly, then you sort of say something which makes it, and you it's a nice expression, so you just try and, you watch the people, and I that's how I work, to the detriment of the technical side, I think.
Yeah, but it's...
Especially when I print some of these old necks.
But it's you're following your instincts.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. Oh, very much so. Oh, very much so. Try and find... No, I think just try and find something that interests them, that you feel that it can balance backwards and forwards, you know. No, I think that's why, for instance, which is really interesting, when I was working with the Stones, they were always quite aloof. Very, very pleasant when I spoke to them, but quite aloof. And people like that, it's difficult to... In fact, the shot, have we got it hanging here, the picture of Mick and Keith? We have, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like after, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning in New York, after a day when they did 3 videos that day, 3 videos, so they were tired. And I had to beg Keith to do it. But you just have to, and he, you know, he's looking slightly grumpy, but he was kind of like, all right, you know. And you just have to try and get that. That's what because I don't want to just do something that makes them just look amazing, but soulless. I'd rather do the other thing, the other way around.
All of that you've just said, that makes the shot?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. We're going to plug in for another bit. I was hoping they'd say that. I can't go on forever. I think we're out of power source.
Well, Michael, thank you very much indeed. It's been wonderful to have you here.
It's all his idea, this. It's very sweet. Thank you, Alex.
Well, no, I mean, it's really nice of you to come.
No, it's nice of you to ask me. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And thank you all.
So just a round of applause for just quickly wanted to say just a really quick thanks to Clive, who's been working extremely hard today to live stream the performance.
Thank you, Clive.
Adam on camera, and Shana, without whom we really couldn't have done today. So
thank you.
Just thank you very much, guys. As I said, Michael's got portfolios out on the table, and there's also obviously the main exhibition out, if you haven't already seen it, outside. But thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank you.
Where was the heckling, Stuart? You promised me heckling.
I mean, you've got the real deal outside. Sure? All right.
Brilliant. Is it all right?